I do feel that when you come from an international background, especially India, there isn't that much information available about the
Exactly.
OxBridge process in general.
I still can't believe that your
Struggling.
AirPods cover, your full sleeve, my full sleeve, all matching. Like, look, it's like I sent you a memo. I said, wear purple. Just be prepared because I have a lot of chaotic energy and all of it will be very evident in this.
I've known you like all my life. I'm aware of the chaotic energy.
Let's go. Hi, everyone. Today, I am interviewing one of my best friends from school who also happens to be very talented and is currently studying at Cambridge University. Avantika, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody who's watching this right now?
Yes. Hi, I'm Avantika and I'm 18 years old and I'm from New Delhi in India. I currently study at the University of Cambridge in England and I was an admit into the class of 2023. I was on campus this year during a national lockdown in the UK. So that was an interesting experience to say the very least.
Lovely.
I'm also a student entrepreneur. So I founded 2 tech startups when I was in high school. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Exactly. You have my college application, one non-profit, Avantika one-ups me every single time. This is our entire relationship. Okay, Avantika, so we are going to start off with one rapid fire just so that people can know who you are as a person and also to loosen things up a bit. And then after that, we're going to go into the 5 different segments that I think make up a majority of a UK application, starting with the road to Cambridge, which is basically just explaining to people why you applied to Cambridge, what is the thought process, what was the preparation you had for it, and then your co-curricular activities, then your statement of purpose, then the interview, and then the testing, which I feel like is the most boring, but you have an interesting story on that. So why not? Okay, first off, we have a rapid fire. I have 10 questions for you.
Number
1.
Let's do it.
3 words you'd use to describe yourself, Avantika Khanna.
Ambitious, tall, messy.
Wow, love it. Number 2, something new you started doing during the lockdown.
During the lockdown, I started baking, painting.
Wow.
Singing. I don't know. I became like one of those people. I was baking banana bread. I was making that coffee thing on TikTok.
Oh,
doing a lot of.
I
I watched Tiger King. I did my lockdown was pretty much everything that you'd see on Instagram. People going like, oh, the first few weeks of lockdown, this is what we did. I
very
basically
basic,
did each and every single one of those things.
Yeah.
It's quite embarrassing, but we move.
Okay, biggest fear you have?
Heights and earthquakes. I'm terrified of earthquakes.
We just had a few in Gurgaon. That was bad.
Yeah. We have what? 5 fault lines under Delhi. Any of them move significantly, we'll all die. So I've done my full research on this.
This is why you didn't apply to Stanford as well. The San Andreas fault.
Yeah.
You were just like, I'm never going there ever.
I watched the movie and after watching it, I was like, okay, California, cancel.
One hobby that you hope you never stop keeping up with?
Singing. So I was trained in Hindustani classical music since the age of 4. So I'm half Bengali. And if you're half Bengali or Bengali in general, music, dance, that's something that you're kind of forced into from a really young age. I'm really glad that I actually enjoyed it. So yeah, so that's something I hope I never stop doing.
One hobby you hope to pick up in the future?
I want to learn how to speak Mandarin. It's not really a hobby, more like a life skill.
Really? Dude, are you one of those people who are just like assets? Language is an asset. Want to communicate?
It is though. It is an asset.
I agree. For sure. And hopefully, maybe you can pick up a class at Cambridge. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, my biggest pet peeve. People that can't use Excel properly.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it just really bothers me.
Shucks, I do not. I'm still on Google Sheets about it. Where do you see yourself in 1 year?
Oh, damn. Okay.
One
hopefully on campus. Hopefully on campus, because currently I am studying online because of the new strain in the UK. So in a year, I hope things settle down and I'm back on campus and doing my thing.
Let's go. What is one thing that Cambridge students were most surprised to hear about you when you first met them?
I think it was probably my startups, because that was something I didn't really talk to people about. And in general, a lot of people do found startups at Cambridge, but the road to Cambridge is more academic and it's more based on, your academic expertise and how much you know about your subject and your interest in it. So when I was talking to people about my personal statement and just in general what I did to kind of get into Cambridge, I think they were always a little surprised to hear that my my path was more to do with entrepreneurship and how that I linked that to what I'm interested in why I want to study what I want to study. So I think.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue into the road to Cambridge, because like, when do you even how do you even know for a fact that you want to apply to the UK? Because I feel like it's a path that you have to be sure you want to take, in the sense that it's all about the academic route you're taking. But yeah, when did you realize it's something you'd wanted to do, and when did you start preparing for it?
Right. So I think a lot of people misunderstand the OxBridge process and think that it's all about academic expertise and how much you know and how smart you are. But I think it's more to do with potential and compatibility, because when they assess you, they're not, of course, they want to know that you know what you're talking about, you know your subject, but they're also not looking for someone that has, PhD level knowledge, because that's their job to teach you, right? So they're just looking for someone that kind of fits into their system, is interested enough to keep up with how rigorous Oxford and Cambridge in general are. So yeah, I think in terms of deciding whether I wanted to go to the UK or not, I looked at whether I had the potential and compatibility, in my eyes at least, to keep up with that system, to be very involved in my subject and take part in the kind of academic discussions that they do have during supervision and such. I was also from a very young age very sure of what I wanted to do. I knew it was either econ or law for me, and I wasn't really the kind of person that wanted to explore a variety of different things. I was very set on my path, and I knew that these were the only things I wanted to explore. And I think the UK in general, if you have a lot of clarity about what you want to do, the UK works out very well for you, because they specialize in things. So if you're taking a particular course in the UK and you're very passionate about it, you will come out after 3 years knowing everything that there is to know about it. So it's more about academic depth instead of breadth. And from the very start, even at school, I've always been about delving deep into things instead of going broad.
Wow. And what eventually led you to choose between Oxford and Cambridge?
So it was actually my course, because the course that I study, it's not offered anywhere else in the UK.
Wow,
so,
unique.
So it's called land economy. It's I think it's new from what I've heard. I mean, so the name is a little bit misleading, because I remember when I told people about it initially, they were like, wait, so you're going to come out after 3 years with, a degree in agriculture? I swear that's not what it is. So it's actually a combination of econ and law. So the modules I'm doing in my first year are public policy, constitutional law, microecon and macroecon, as well as statistics. So it's a little bit of everything in general, and these are the subject areas that I'm most interested in. Like I mentioned, I was always sure that I wanted to do either econ or law, and I like the fact that this course provided me with the opportunity to do both of them.
Right.
So I think that's why I picked Cambridge over Oxford, and in general, I just think Cambridge is really pretty and superior institution.
Right. Everyone has a complex. And then I think another thing I really wanted to know is, being an international student, you're an Indian citizen, how does that make the process a little different from you, and how did you approach the entire thing from that lens?
So I studied in the ICSE curriculum. So ISC, I gave ISC in the 12th grade and ICSE in the 10th grade. And that does make it significantly harder, for the simple reason that when you ultimately end up going to Cambridge, you realize that the assessment is entirely based on critical analysis of academic reading and a lot of essay-based content. And that's something that you learn very well when you're in IB or A levels, or even AP to a certain extent. It's something that you're quite comfortable and familiar with, just critical analysis in general, which is something that I feel from my experience at school, ICSE students aren't really that equipped. It's not that we can't do it, it's just that it's very unfamiliar. Yeah. And for that very reason, I feel like when you are applying, admissions officers are obviously aware of the fact that this is a significant, I wouldn't say disadvantage, but drawback of the Indian curriculum. So I think that definitely does make it a little harder, but not impossible, because at the end of the day, like I said, they're looking for potential and compatibility. So if you can show them through your personal statement, your testing, your academic grades, letters of recommendation, interview, that you have what it takes to adapt into that system and engage at a very high level with academic literature, I think you're sorted.
And then the last thing for the road to Cambridge that I'd really like to know about is there's almost a psychological distance between you and the university. You know, you feel like it's almost something that's impossible. And I felt the same way for Stanford. What are a few ways you try to establish any form of demonstrated interest in Cambridge, or try to make sure that you can get at least a foot in the door for the entire process?
Right. Actually, yeah, that's actually a very good question because it is very intimidating when you're applying to a college. You feel like there's this massive bridge between, this gap between you and the college that you have to bridge. And I feel like demonstrated interest not only shows admissions officers that you're interested in the uni, but it also helps you become more familiar and talk about the course you're studying or the place you want to go with a certain level of authority and familiarity, which definitely shows through in your application.
Right.
When it came to demonstrated interest, I visited Cambridge, and I know that not a lot of people have the opportunity to do that because, it's far and it's just taxing in general. But a few ways you can do that is use your LinkedIn network. I can't emphasize enough on how helpful LinkedIn can be. If you can't actually go and visit the campus and, talk to professors, because I've always found that Cambridge professors, lecturers, supervisors, very open to communication. Find them on LinkedIn, find a student on LinkedIn, talk to people and understand more about the process. I do feel that when you come from an international background, especially India, there isn't that much information available about the OxBridge process in general. It's very intimidating because you kind of feel like you're thrown into the deep end of it and you don't know much. And which is why LinkedIn networking or networking in general can provide you with a lot of clarity. You end up knowing a lot more and you end up knowing the nuances of it, which you wouldn't really know if you just went on their website. And mention that in your interviews. Talk about how you spoke to a certain person and that changed your viewpoint and how it helped you choose between Oxford or Cambridge, for example, or your specific course. And it's always very helpful to know the path that certain people took to get where they got and to see if there are any links that you can establish. And networking in general is very helpful. You never know what leads to what. So I definitely recommend that.
That's so true. And then going into the second segment, which I feel like a lot of people just don't talk about when it comes to the OxBridge process, which is all about co-curriculars. How did you approach the entire process? How did you figure out how much time you wanted to give to your co-curriculars, given the fact that academics were a priority applying to Oxbridge? How did all of that look for you?
So again, I think a very common misconception is that Oxford and Cambridge don't care about your co-curricular activities, which is not the case. They do definitely care because that shows a certain level of expertise in a particular area, and it also shows the kind of person you would be at their campus. So when it came to co-curriculars, I was very clear that it had to be divided into two sets. The first was demonstrated interest in my academics outside of school. So that would be reading, that would be online courses, summer programs, internships, research papers, and the like, which show that I've engaged with the academic material at a higher level. Right. And then there would obviously be things that I did for me. So I was always very interested in student entrepreneurship, business, tech. So I ventured into startups and entrepreneurship in general during high school. I founded 2 startups. One was a tech-based app. It was a tour guide. It's called India Story.
It's on my phone.
Basically guided. Is it?
Yeah, it is.
So it guides and basically guides tourists through monuments by GPS tracking and interactive podcasts. And then the other was an e-commerce website called Symmetry, and it's basically it helps artisans get online and sell their products in a marketplace. So it simulates what you would find as a weekly bazaar in a rural outskirts. So it does that, but online. So these were 2 things that I did in terms of co-curriculars. I never thought that they would actually help me in the Oxford and Cambridge application process. I always thought this was something that US unis cared about more. But as I went through the process, I realized I couldn't be more wrong. In fact, a large portion of my interview, which I personally believe is one of the most significant parts of the application process, was entirely about India Story and my tech startups. They just wanted to know about that. So out of like a 40-minute interview, we spoke about it for about 25 minutes, and that's a huge chunk of time.
And then just on the in-depth reading side, what were a few summer programs, research papers, or online courses you took that you feel like helped you in just gathering your knowledge, since ISC doesn't offer the most holistic perspective when it comes to, an A-level or an IB curriculum?
So I think the most important thing for me was to show that although my board, ICSE, isn't essay-based, I can write essays and engage in critical analysis. So because of that, I started my own blog, and it wasn't something, it wasn't a blog that was getting a lot of traction or anything of that sort. It was just me penning down what I felt about like the global economic landscape and law in general. So it was like short articles, about a minute long read, but it just demonstrated, firstly, kept me up to date with everything that was going on, which is very important for the OxBridge process, because they do tend to ask you a lot about that. And the more informed you are, the better you come across.
Right.
It also demonstrated to them that I could engage in critical analysis, and the fact that I wanted to engage in critical analysis because this was initiative that I took outside of my, school academics. So that was one thing that I did. I also took a lot of online courses, and it doesn't necessarily have to be online courses directly related to your field. I ended up taking a lot of game theory courses. I ended up taking stuff in, coding. I ended up taking just a variety of things, different aspects of law. But what that did was it helped me understand more about my niche. I feel like the more you know about things in general, the more you can see how they connect to your niche. And that's what I did. That's what I showed in my interview as well, because, I showed them how like psychology connected to econ, or how like sociology connected to econ. And that was only because I'd engaged in academic rigor outside of my school, and I could, kind of link things back because I just knew what was going on. So that was one thing I did. In terms of research papers, I didn't personally write any research papers. If you get the opportunity, nothing like it. It prepares you in general for uni, and it also adds, a certain level of academic authority. But I did intern at an organization. It's a research think tank. It's called Cantor IMRB, and I work within the econometrics department. And I think this is something that people don't think would make a significant impact, but just read The Economist, read, Times, just keep up with the news. I personally, like right now, lying out there is a massive stack of, Economists starting all the way back from 2018. I have all of them there, and I used to read them from the very beginning. And this is something, it's a small step. It doesn't take a lot. Just, download The Economist on your phone, your iPad, read it if you can. It does really make a huge difference, because you end up having a lot more information which you can pull from your brain and discuss. And it does teach you how to engage critically, because these newspaper publications, the reputed ones, tend to do that. They'll, pick up a topic and they'll analyze it. And just by engaging with that and reading it, you too somehow pick up how to analyze academic literature.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think these are skills that are best developed over time. And it's not even like you're putting in a huge amount of effort. It's literally just one newspaper a day. And it's all about just like inculcating that habit into your system. Like, it's personally something I haven't started and I want to start. But yeah, just like one parallel newspapers, like literally a few pages a day, and you're automatically compensating for some of the skills your school might not be able to provide you at the time. And since we've spoken so much about the interview, I also want to just get it out in this section as well. Because I feel like from an outside perspective, it's one of the most intimidating things about this process, the amount of in-depth knowledge you require. How did you go about preparing for the entire process? Because I know you have communication hands down, but it's a lot of the critical thinking that you have to display in those interviews are not things you're used to doing, especially in school.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. For me, the interview process was, I would definitely say if Oxford and Cambridge are your top priorities, start early. I feel like I started preparing for the interview quite late in the day, and that added a lot of stress. And like you mentioned, some of these skills you just can't pick up overnight. It's something that you develop. So I definitely say start early. In fact, the email that I got from Cambridge saying that I was invited to the interview, they said, there was like a very clear paragraph about students applying for humanities-based subjects. Please, engage in just keep up with the news, read the New York Times, read, The Economist. So that's something that they tell you from the university. So if you can start doing that, if you have this piece of information now and you can start doing that early, nothing like it. I was also very familiar with everything I mentioned on my personal statement. So I mentioned certain concepts. So for example, I mentioned the Human Development Index, and I mentioned a particular book in a research paper. Now, these weren't things that when I wrote about them in my personal statement, I obviously had an understanding of it, but I wasn't as familiar with it as I would have had to be to do well in my interview. Because your personal statement gets your foot in the door, and then your interview is a discussion of everything that you know related to that. So I definitely suggest make sure that if you know 50% of what you've mentioned in your personal statement, you go to like 120%, because most of the things that they do end up asking you in the interview are a reflection of the topics you have mentioned in your personal statement. So I think the personal statement is your Bible. Use it, see what you've written, and read around those topics. So when I spoke about the Human Development Index, I read about human development in general. I read about the different parameters used to measure it. I read about like different coefficients and regression and time series forecasting that they use to calculate it. I read about, different countries and how they have kind of tried to boost their human development and what's worked and what's not worked. So just in general, reading around it. They also do have recommended reading lists on almost all the department pages. So if you can read that, nothing like it. And again, LinkedIn networking, find someone, this is something I didn't do, but I definitely recommend it. Find someone that's studying the course you want to study on LinkedIn or through a friend. See what they read, see what they currently read at uni. For example, if someone came and asked me and I told them my first year syllabus and told them that, this is what I'm reading, these are the, this is what they recommend, these are the books, these are the articles. If you read that, show up to the interview, you're sorted.
Right. And, going off of that, what's one thing that you wish you did in the interview a little differently, which maybe you didn't see coming, or maybe just a mistake you made that you would like to have rectified?
Definitely. So I think two of them. The biggest was that you have to be prepared for the fact that they will provide you. So they will provide you with material you've never seen before. So for me, I had to read an article, and I think it was about fishing rights, a trade deal between the EU. I think it was a bilateral investment agreement between the EU and Senegal, and how that impacted fishing rights and the economic and legal impacts of it. I had no idea what I was doing when I read that article. I read it 4 or 5 times, still couldn't understand. And I think that caught me off guard. So they give you about 20 minutes to read this, and then they call you in for the interview. And I remember thinking, I'm not getting in. I don't know anything about this. So I spent majority of that time just panicking. So when I walked into the interview, the first thing my interviewer asked me was, have you read anything like this before? And I told him, I've never come across anything like this. And he said, that's the point. We don't expect you to know what we're giving you the passage on. We just want to see how you can engage with it. So even the questions he asked me didn't have much to do with bilateral investment agreements or, fishing rights in general, but more about the conclusions I could draw from it. So I think that's really important, knowing that they don't expect you to be an expert. Right. They just want to see how you can cope with the material. And if you're open to, bouncing off of their ideas, contributing something new. So that was definitely the first thing. And the second thing would be, there's a difference between interviews in general and academic interviews. So, when you speak in school, you have, a student council election and you're interviewing, or you're interviewing for a job. It's very different from when you're presenting academic opinion. So definitely practice with someone, a parent, a friend, a school counselor, anybody, and ask them to, talk to you about academic concepts. It takes a lot to kind of, put that out in words, because when you're having an interview, at the end of the day, it's a conversation. But when it comes to an academic interview, what is essentially an Oxford-Cambridge interview, you have to present your thoughts as coherently as possible, and they have to make a lot of sense. Because it could be in your head, but if you're not communicating it well enough, they'll never really know what's in your head. So definitely practice with someone, talk to them, see how, and record yourself, see how, you're coming across, if you're actually being able to get at the gist of the points you're trying to present, or if it's just, word vomit, if it's all in your head. Right. So I definitely recommend that.
For sure. And also because you are just a natural communicator, and I think that's a strength you have. There's a compliment you're not getting in real life outside this interview. What is something you think that definitely helped you in the interview process, and some advice you'd give to other people who maybe don't feel like it's their strongest suit and are probably focusing the most on that?
So I definitely think, even if you're a strong communicator, the interview can be very intimidating, because it all depends on the interview style of the person you're with. So a lot of them will, just nod. Some won't say anything. Others will look completely disinterested. And I was lucky enough to have an interviewer that was very engaged in what I was saying. And I know that was not the case with a lot of people. It's a varying difference. So I think the most important thing is to know that they're going to give you prompts throughout the interview. They don't want to just hear you speak. They want to see if you can bounce off their ideas and if you can connect what they're saying to what you're reading. So a lot of times when you're nervous, you end up speaking a lot and not really paying attention to what the other person is saying. So I think stop, pause, breathe, hear what they're saying. And I know I made this mistake in my interview. He was asking me about something to do with foreign direct investment. And I went on a tangent. I continued speaking and he stopped me in the middle and he said, can you elaborate on this? And I didn't really pick up on the hint that he was giving me, but you have to remember that they're going to continuously give you hints. And I continued speaking and then he redirected me again and said, can you elaborate on this? Or, what are your thoughts on this? And that's when I finally understood that he was trying to direct the conversation towards a particular end goal.
Right.
So definitely, because you're interviewing with a person, it's not a video interview like they have for a lot of jobs and internships in the UK where you're just speaking to a camera and, the question is displayed. It's actually a person out there trying to see how well you can engage with something. So pay attention to them, see what they have to say and see if you can pick up on their verbal cues, body language cues, and guide the conversation in the direction that they want to take it, want you to take it to. So definitely that's one thing. So just breathe and hear them out because they're there to help you. They're not there to catch you off guard, which is something that I realized very late in the process. I thought it was going to be the interviewer versus me, but it's actually the interviewer guiding you so that they can admit you. They want you to be a part of that class. That's why they called you for the interview, right? And they're trying to steer the conversation in a particular direction. Just pay attention to that and, don't unnecessarily just go off on a tangent like I did.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last segment that I was curious about was your personal statement as well as the testing side of things. How did you, what were the things you focused on the most for the personal statement? How did you research for that? Because it does end up being the Bible that really tries to get you through the entire application process.
Okay, so first comes your personal statement, then comes your testing day. So for personal statement, what I did, and I think it worked for me from whatever I've gauged from my entire application, and I definitely recommend go onto the website. So for example, for me, it was land economy, and they have a departmental website. They have a reading list, and they also have a breakdown of modules. So they'll tell you that this is what they study and under each thing, this is what the relevant skills are. This is what we're looking for. And there are a lot of keywords out there, which I think give you a lot of information about what it is that module is teaching you and the course in general is teaching you. They also have examples of dissertations at the bottom. Dissertation is something that you essentially write in your third year of uni. And, it's like this massive, it's almost like a research project that you do and you get a final grade on it. So they have, past your dissertation topics. And what that does is it provides you with an understanding of what it is that they're looking for and the kind of student, the kind of material that they want to see on your application. So what I did was I opened an Excel sheet and I just charted it down. So for example, if it was law, because my course covers multiple different disciplines, so I divided it by law, econ, stats, and policy. And I just put down modules. So for example, in policy, there was something about building sustainable cities and urban infrastructure and planning. So I plotted that and I attended the Yale Young Global Scholars Program with Shaurya. And, we studied a lot about sustainability in general.
For
so
sure.
I put down YYGS right next to it to say that, okay, for this bit, if I mention this in my personal statement, I can relate it to this. So what it does is this entire Excel exercise, which I recommend, it provides clarity in general. It makes sure that your personal statement is relevant to them, their course, and it just shows that you are exactly what they're looking for. So I recommend that. Just plot down what it is that they teach you and what you've done that shows that you know this, and just put it together in your personal statement. So that's what I did.
Right.
And another thing I'd say is that a lot of people stress about, we have to include 500 books or 6 research papers, 7 online courses, I just have to know it all.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. So what I did was to show a certain level of, nuance and I think just in general command over my area of study. I linked it back to my tech ventures. And now that's not necessarily academic. and I didn't cite any papers, or I didn't say I read this and from here I gained XYZ experience. I just said that this is something I learned, and I explained an academic concept and related to something related something theoretical to something practical.
Right.
And yeah, so I just think that it's definitely relevant and extremely helpful to read as much as you can, to have, cite papers, talk about, different books, speakers, events, conferences. But if you can't do that, don't think that you can't get your foot in the door, because you definitely can. There's always something that you've learned that you can relate to a practical example in your life.
Yeah. And I think practical examples are also just a lot more powerful. I feel like reading books and reading research papers, it arms you for like an interview when you're really testing your academic expertise. But at the end of the day, people who graduate from Cambridge University, not all of them are going to become academics. All of them are going to go into a field where all of these theoretical, disciplines are going to turn into practical experiences. And the fact that you have that from such a young age in an industry like tourism, which I doubt many 17 or 16-year-olds have, is definitely an advantage in itself. And you don't necessarily have to see it as a crutch. Yeah, if I ran a word counter on the amount of times you said critical analysis, running through the roof. You need,
I know, critical analysis, academic engagement, academic expertise.
Just like write it on your head. Just like go into the interview with that. Dude, I would fail in a second, dude. I'd have to prep so much. Okay, perfect. I think we have covered everything, but you're not leaving without another rapid fire. So I have to give you.
Go on.
First one, and this is the answer that matters a lot over here. Harvard or Stanford, Avantika Khanna?
You know my answer to this very clearly. Harvard.
Damn it.
Harvard through.
This shit's going to go to Harvard Business School, I'm telling you. Favorite thing about Cambridge?
Oh, I really like the fact that I get to live in a place that looks straight out of Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's my favorite part about it.
You
just feel like you want to walk down, the streets in like, a robe.
What is one thing that your first semester at college has taught you that high school just did not?
How to make sense, because at school,
wow, Avantika, what are we?
No, I'll tell you why. Shaura, I have known you since the second grade. In the second grade, friendship was very simple. You just had to be like, hello, I am new girl in school. You are sitting next to me. We're friends now. And that's how our friendship worked as well. I never really made sense, because all my friends in school I've known since the second grade, third grade, and they just last a lifetime after a point. So I think just in general, communicating with people, being open and understanding that there are, different roles that different people play in your life, and embracing that, and embracing the fact that a lot of the people that you end up getting very close to might not be similar to you. And that's okay. And that's one of the best things about uni, because I feel like at school, all my friends were very much like me. We were just like cut, copy, paste. And, but I think at uni, it's very interesting, because you meet a lot of people that you never thought you'd click with, or people with very interesting perspectives on life and different lived experiences. And it's always nice to hear. And nice to be a part of that.
Okay. And the one last question that I would like you to give to this channel is one piece of advice you have for high school students who are looking to come to Cambridge, hopefully in the future.
Don't be intimidated by it. I think that's the biggest thing, because when you look at, schools in general, like Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, you just think that they're unattainable. But remember that people like you that also thought it was unattainable got in. Yeah. So I think the biggest part of doing well in this is to break that barrier, because I had it. I knew that, from the start in my head, it was like, it's Oxford, Cambridge, very different kind of people get in, and I don't stand a chance. And because of that, in a lot of ways, I shied away from the process. I was unfamiliar with it. It just acted like a mental barrier. Didn't let me engage as much with the process as I thought I should have. And I think once you kind of get past that initial hesitation, you're good to go.
Thank you so much for being here, Avantika. I hope this helps tons of people. And yeah.